Okay, so what I've just kind of outlined earlier on was just simply in terms of this is palm oil, this is what the big companies are kind of dealing with, and just to give you some context to where is Wild Asia's or Wild Asia's position in terms of rolling this work forward. Um, so the first thing you got to understand is like SAI was a kind of an old term for us, and we used to have this, as part of our kind of early palm oil work. Um, but in essence, it's about improving land use planning. It's about reducing pressures on natural habitats. It's about creating opportunities for enhancing natural corridors and ensuring that the businesses meet or exceed the international standards. So you can see that, the RSPO work isn't the only thing that we're interested in. It's just that there's not a lot of people doing stuff that we all end up in that box. But just to give you this idea that, we're actually trying to look at larger landscapes or larger areas. And ultimately, it's to do good for biodiversity and also for people, and making sure that the businesses are, kind of a positive contribution. So palm oil is the sector that we worked, mainly because that's where most of the attention has been. But we seem to also be having some work in the rubber and also other commodities. Exactly the same work is going on in sugar, the same work is going on in soy. It's just that we're not at all positioned to kind of start addressing those issues. Um, and in terms of how we are organized internally, it seems that we have two core programs, the technical support program and the Wild Asia Group Scheme. So TSP is a sort of consulting hub for us. It's the sort of, it does all the done line jobs, so things that we don't have, where we've not had much experience with, we would kind of take some of these things on. So it's really like an advisory service, and it deals with big corporations, governments to SMEs. WAGS, on the other hand, is a management group scheme. In some ways, it says we would support producers or potentially also like palm users to meet the RSPO standard. But it could also mean it could meet other standards. And so it's not just with RSPO. Similarly, we think of WAGs as being useful only for the smallholders, but you've just got to remember that the group scheme is relevant also for anybody else, any of the other producers. And then on the supply chain side, it's also going to be relevant for those who are using, those who use less than 500 metric tons per month. So for those users, group schemes are also going to be relevant. So at some point, we should also be thinking about this. You will also have heard of things like stepwise support program, but that is specifically related to our work that we started with ProForest many years ago. And bio is something new that you would hear, and this is basically kind of, it's an offshoot of TSP, and it's going to focus more on biodiversity and HCV issues. And it's something that we are kind of slowly developing right now. Aisha in London is kind of our key link for that. And essentially, we're talking about biodiversity in production landscapes. I mean, that's the sort of theme for that bit of work. So how are we structured? So as like I said, SAI really has two components. There should be a TSP component and a WAGS component. At this level, that's why it seems to be very easy. We realized that we're going to need to have more administrative support. so that we can focus on technical work. Ultimately, it's going to have, it needs somebody to direct all this. So I guess in some ways that's the role that I play. And then we're going to need to think about, kind of group technical, um, kind of managers who run programs and stuff. And this is what we also need to evolve into, this idea that we will have technical teams who can deal with certain parts of our work, but they don't have to do all our work, but they have to understand how the work fits in this sort of bigger picture. And this is how I think it's going to be organized. Similarly, for the smallholders, the smallholder work is more about kind of on the ground delivery. And so it's got, instead of technical boxes, it's actually a kind of geographic boxes. You will see Thailand being mentioned because we're also exploring some work there. There's West Malaysia, which is where Wai Hing is, and then also Sabah. And we have multiple projects. So down below, you'll have one or more projects that are linked up in some ways to these things. But just remember, they're not just smallholder projects. We would also be building up experience and capacity for the small businesses, but there will also be effort towards biodiversity and social work in these spaces as well. And that's more exploratory. The other thing I've just got to say is that these terms, group program manager, field program manager, etc., all these things are kind of work in progress. And you may find that somebody is mentioned in this box and they think, oh, now I'm suddenly group program manager. It's not really that. It's just that these are roles that we are hoping people will develop into, because we obviously don't have sufficient resources to create all these positions. But I just found it quite useful to see it in this context, just to know how will we need to grow in the coming years. Now, this is a very important layer because basically we have found in Sabah that having one person, i.e. Dean, coordinate projects and run projects is something that's not really working. So we're trying to see a separation between management, which is all of these. So there's management, there's technical teams, and this is maybe how WAGS is organized. But then when we get to a particular project, they would be managed by this type of structure. So there needs to be some kind of project manager. There needs to be clusters are basically, it could be a small region, it could be a mill, it could be anything. But then there should be somebody dedicated to work with that group. And then they have the field assistants down below. So now this is where the caveat is, just hang on, don't be worried if your name is there and stuff like that. But this is just, this is still work in progress, but this is how currently it kind of looks. In terms of, obviously there's a few positions that we need to kind of clarify, maybe Ying, Gontong, and in some ways also we've had to push some people up in terms of Chris and Dean. But again, they're all involved in projects already. So it's not something that this is not going to be automatic. But we just think that it's time to kind of create these positions and try and think about how to make these positions work. But it does need everyone to realize that this is, it's a kind of two-way thing. It needs everybody's kind of cooperation to kind of make these things happen. And in terms of the technical team, this is who I think we have. There may be more, but that's why I'm saying let's have this updated. And then over in on the WAG side, this is what I'm hoping would be the kind of structure. And as you can see, we don't have a national coordinator, and so Waiheng doesn't have somebody in West Malaysia sitting over his head. But if Waiheng gets the 3 dealerships, well, then maybe that's Waiheng's position one day. So this is how I think we're going to be structured conceptually. Then in terms of projects, we have the Beluran project. So I'm hoping that Daniel will maybe grow to be the lead for this. And then we're going to have 2 mills, and then eventually there'll be another mill, which is Reka Halus. So we're going to need to ensure that we identify who will be leading some of this work. This hasn't been updated, so Kinabatangan is not there, and what I haven't added was also, do we have Perak? Yeah, Perak we haven't done, but Perak is very easily. It's just Waiheng. Okay, so I guess nobody knows that one. So then, in terms of WAGs, I think we've got 4 main projects which are active: the iKuning work, Kinabatangan, KLK, and Beluran. As you can see, some are dealers and smallholders, some are direct to smallholders. KLK and Beluran has a small grower component. So this is where it becomes not just smallholders, but then we're having to deal with the small companies. Then, in terms of the bio projects, we've just heard the forestry work is confirmed. We're still kind of detailing out what needs to happen and stuff like this, but basically it's a sort of 1-year project. This is actually quite important for us because it's dealing with the forestry sector. It's closer to my heart in terms of trying to save forests. But basically, what's happening here is these are concessions which are for 99 years, and the state has said, well, look, the area should be turned into industrial tree plantations. What we're trying to say to the company is, well, surely not all of it should be done this way. And so the work this year is really about trying to assess how do we analyze and set aside areas that should not be developed, but yet at the same time helping them on the areas that they can develop so that they have better value. So then they'll be more agreeable to kind of protecting the forest that they have left behind. There's a social dimension to this, which is what are communities doing? What resources are they utilizing? And is there anything there that could be turned into small community enterprises? So the forestry project is going to be very interesting. It's going to be challenging. And I'm still not sure who actually is going to be involved. I'm trying to rope in some other associates on this, but I am sure anybody I think some of the Sabah people might get involved. Nadia, definitely you would have some role to play in this. But let's see how it goes. We still have to get to some of the details. PNG is equally scary. Big development, not done yet, and basically we're sort of stepping in to say, well, not all of it should be developed, if any, but it's the same sort of story. Well, if you don't develop it, then is the project going to be financially viable? So we are going to be part of a team, including some financial advisors from Australia and a bunch of other people. So this one is something we're sitting on. Then I've just mentioned here Beluran smallholder or HCV, but this one is actually for all our smallholder spaces, because ultimately we're trying to say that for for our producers, there is no deforestation. That's the first thing we have to say. The second thing is those areas that we are pulling from, the forest has not decreased in time. So that's the second big demonstration that we kind of have to be able to monitor and show. And if we find that there is a negative correlation, then we need to be able to use our relationship with the stakeholders to do something about it. So that is really the sort of, that's from the forest HCV dimension. From a social dimension, we need to figure out what would be the key indicators. But again, it's about saying, well, you can produce, production of palm oil from a particular region has a positive impact on income or schools or something, some kind of social dimension. And that's something that we need to get our heads around, like what exactly is that going to look like? So this, I think, should give you a kind of overview about kind of like, kind of the upcoming projects. So before I carry on, are there any questions? So project management wise, I mean, this is actually where we've been struggling. What we're hoping is that for Wild Asia, so Wild Asia project management ultimately means that we should be able to listen to the ground, and we need to use this to improve the way that we are delivering our work. I mean, that's essentially what we're actually trying to achieve. It's not easy, but if we can get to this point, then I think a lot of our work is actually going to get better, and people are going to, all of you will feel that you're actually contributing. So on a practical level, these are the things that I really need everybody to start figuring out how to do efficiently. So we need to know what you are doing, and to be able to report this in a way that is easy for us to extract it. We need the field reports and baseline data sheets in a format that's easy to be accessible to a wider pool of people. So, for example, the reason why we had the baseline assessment was so that we can collect standardized information. But if it doesn't sit in the Dropbox, then it's not accessible to anybody. And we can't even check to see if there's any problems with what you're collecting because we can't actually see the data. And then the other thing is this idea of like this two-way feedback is we also need to have a way of collecting feedback, challenges, action plans, so that it's easier for us to help monitor projects and also to see where areas that we can improve or where resources are needed. And then finally, expenses. So all your spending needs to be in a way fed to us so that we're able to understand where the money is going, but also where we're not spending any money. And then it can kind of help us manage, or either we need more money, or we need to spend less in some areas, or we need to spend more in some areas. That's a very important thing. So these things are the sort of fundamentals. This is something that everybody needs to be able to do. And if we do this well, we should be able to do a number of very critical things. This idea of financial reporting, because we have many donors, they all need to know where is the money going, and are we spending or we're not spending. And we haven't been able to do this very well because because sometimes we're just not keeping track of money that has been committed. That means we don't spend it. We don't spend it, it means that maybe we should have had some new people that we could afford, but we didn't know. So this whole financial management is actually a problem for us, but it's something we're going to try and improve. Progress reporting happens quarterly, but it's actually more about keeping track of targets and objectives. If we don't know what the targets are, it's very hard for you to know whether the project is moving or not. And also, you can't be waiting for directions. We need people to grow so that you can move yourself. You will see opportunities for yourself. You don't always have to wait for Sheila or me or anybody to tell you what to do. And that's the reason why getting into sort of progress reporting could be one way of doing this. Impact reporting are the things that the external parties will be more interested in. Is zero deforestation being achieved? Are income levels going up? Is the net profit from palm oil going up? So that sort of thing. Then communication lessons learned would be how is our work being channeled or communicated? Every year we have the RSPO booth, but we always think about it 3 weeks before the actual event. There could be papers we need to write. There could be videos we need to do. So these are things that if we don't think about it on a regular basis, then we're not going to grow the work the way we want it to. So the things that we have to learn, and this is something that is going to take a little bit of brain time, but just being clear how to set up a project. Where do I get project numbers? How do I write a project concept? So there are certain tasks that we are doing, but we realize it's something that needs to be standardized so that everyone, or at least the key, when you want to grow to a management level, these are the things that you need to be able to do. In terms of running projects, you always have people, and you need to make sure that everyone is brief, and it doesn't happen all the time, and I completely understand that. And then the final thing is then just in terms of the actual management of the project, in terms of the activities, we manage the expenses, we publish the work, we meet, we document our meetings, and we manage our data so that it's in the right place. It's archived when it needs to, or it goes to a certain place. So these are all the things which are very important to do. And I know that everyone's very busy, but it's something we're going to have to figure out how to do so that it is more efficient. And then hopefully from the field perspective, if you're in a field project, there are certain key things that you also have to be involved with. So you're not just out there in the sticks, but slowly we're going to try and rope you in. We're also realizing that because we are having different donors, different key stakeholders, we kind of need to get into this routine of steering group meetings, because that helps us solve problems, it helps us identify solutions, but also helps us keep track of our projects. So some of you have been involved with these meetings with Cargill and Solly and stuff like this, and I think those are the things that are going to be called steering group meetings. But similarly, like for Beluran, the field implementation is really between the mill, WAGS, and the Wilma people. And so we need to also make sure that these things are done, are also held. Then in terms of project team meetings, that these are the idea is that you keep track of progress, you document your challenges, and you see what needs to be done to move forward. So it could happen post the project, or it could be part of your regular meetings. So if you're in, say, the Beluran teams would meet once a month, or Wai Heng meets himself, or actually, no, Wai Heng should be meeting somebody like maybe Sheila, or maybe you'll have a field assistant. Um, so it gets to a point where you're thinking strategically about your project, or maybe in Wai Heng's case, this might be with the dealer himself, so that we can kind of coordinate the work to review back progress and stuff like this. Um, so this is so these are just, I'm just talking, giving you some idea as to how we need to get ourselves organized. But what I realized is it is going to be quite challenging when we have projects and we have themes, and all of us are going to be stuck in kind of just meeting people all the time. So I then started thinking in terms of what is more critical, what needs to happen more frequently or less frequently. So I thought at the top level, kind of a group meeting should happen maybe once a year. Obviously, that's going to be a challenge with everybody in different places, but we will figure out how to make that happen. And this may happen in January. Something we started this year was this idea of quarterly meetings for different themes. Again, this was about trying to be a bit more strategic in terms of, is there sufficient funds coming in? What projects in the pipeline? So we're sort of still improving that. But now comes the bit that you guys are in, which is, how do we make sure that there's more coordination done for individual projects, so that it's very clear, what are the objectives and stuff like this, objectives, targets, and you'll end up with specific action plans and stuff. What I'm going to do sometime this year is then think about creating a sort of dashboard. So this idea that we can compare Perak with Beluran to see whether or not, from an overall perspective, how are they managing it, how are they meeting their targets, etc., etc., etc. So this, and it could work for every project that we do. And hopefully that would help us see where we need help or where we need to improve and things like this. I don't even know when we're going to have the time to do this, but that's just, so I'm just putting these out as ambitions. These are things that we could be doing. Then a lot of what I'm saying in terms of management, these are things that need to be documented in some ways, because if you don't have access to this type of material, it's very hard for you to do some self-learning. So it's not like somebody can teach you one day and then you're expecting to get it. And there's a lot of things that you're going to need to learn. So I've divided them up into technical guides and management guides. So technical guides could be health and safety, could be one technical guide. And they may break up into lots of different topics, but you can see that it's different from how to set up a project in Wild Asia. So where is my project code, etc. So what we're hoping to do, at least in the first stage, is to make sure that we have them written up. We have been doing it, but it's, I think, just not in a place or position that's accessible to anybody. So that's why it appears that everything is a bit kalang kabut. But that's a big part of what we need to solve, which is also where things are stored and how they should be stored. But more on all this later on.